Hi, David. Nice to see you.
Hey Bob, how about you, buddy? How you doing?
Doing real good, thanks.
Good, man. You've got the perfect job for this times of COVID. Hopefully you're spending a lot of time outside.
Sure am.
Good.
I have three little boys, and you can't keep them in the house.
Oh, running up and down the hills was a blast.
You got it.
I'm starting to get an interest in birding. Would it be nice if the cities had a birding list of the birds they find in the city of San Luis Obispo?
Yeah, you know what? There's a website. It's called eBird.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I use it.
yeah, and then so I was looking at Laguna Lake on eBird the other day.
Uh-huh.
There's over 240 species of birds that have been documented on eBird at Laguna Lake,
It's
including some
amazing.
including some very rare birds like vermilion flycatcher and southwestern flycatcher and
It's a
tricolor
wonderful
blackbird.
resource.
Yeah, pretty neat.
Yeah, my neighbor and I saw a bird and looked at the bird books we had for the Central Coast and Southern California and couldn't find the bird in there. It was
Yeah.
one of
Oh,
those
my.
rare ones.
Well,
Yeah, the problem is you get male versus female and juvenile versus adult, and it gets, for me, I have a hard time distinguishing the difference.
yeah.
Do they have anything about the mammals that you found in the open space, Bob?
Um,
Or just would
so,
be in the individual reports you do on the open space?
right. When we do a conservation plan, we always do a biological inventory, and we'll put the wildlife species there. They're sometimes a little harder than plants and birds, but we get some pretty interesting things on our cameras. We had a bear feeding from a cattle trough the other night that we were looking at, and
Nice.
a regular bobcat, 20 or 30 photos of the same cat in the same spot over and over.
All right, so Bob, how do we make open space acquisition and preservation a priority in the city?
Well, you're doing it right now.
It's going to take more than this, I think.
Yeah. So for those of you that are online already, I'm Bob Hill, and I run our city open space program together with my colleague Doug Carskaden, Ranger Doug, who's also online here today. I'm just going to wait for a few more people to come in. And then we have our staff colleague, our good colleague, Lynn Wilwand here. Lynn, do you see other people that are still waiting to come into the room?
I've been letting them in as they get to the waiting room, so there's nobody waiting.
Just like to give it a few more minutes. I have a brief presentation to give, just 3 slides, some facts and figures about open space, and then we'll get into the input. John Smigelski, are you still seeing the bald eagle at Laguna Lake with any regularity?
I haven't, but it seems like it's in Perfumo Creek area, which I don't get a good view of. But that's what I've heard has been sighted lately.
Yeah, local. Neat.
Local, yeah.
I was sent a picture of it on Tuesday, so it was around.
Yeah. I think I saw 4 types of egrets one day.
That's good. Yep.
It's good to see Jan on the chat, but I think we need to have some of the other council people on here that maybe need to hear the importance of open space. I think Jan already knows how important it is.
You do? Why do you think that, David?
Well, you wrote a very good column about it recently.
Well, I'm just curious about I don't know if we should ask questions now, but the health of Laguna Lake and the natural preserve there.
Sure. Right now, Laguna Lake is very interesting because the lake levels have remained very high throughout the summer and continuing now into late fall and even into the winter before we've even had any substantial rains. And so that's been really interesting, and we think it may have to do with when there's, irrigation that was going on at the former Delidio property, but we don't know for sure. We don't have X-ray vision to tell what's going on in that interaction between surface water and groundwater. But certainly, since they stopped farming there and pumping their wells, Laguna Lake has not drawn down like it has in prior years. From time to time, when it gets really hot in the summertime, we have the blue-green algae, which is problematic, and we're testing with that. And there are solutions to that, but they require regulatory approval. So we're looking into those options as well. And we do have Laguna Lake programmed in our CIP for the dredging and sediment management project coming up for this summer.
Mhm.
Lynn, are you still letting people in? No? Okay, wonderful. Maybe I'll get started. So again, my name is Bob Hill. I am the city's Sustainability and Natural Resources official. I'm joined here with my good colleague, Ranger Doug Carskaden. We work together as a team and with our respective staff personnel. And Lynn Wilwand is our other good colleague who's here helping with the room management. Just have a few reminders about Zoom and how you can comment in the chat box and raise your virtual hand. And of course, we're looking for a good productive session here. Gonna stop sharing that screen and switch over here now to a different, I have just a few slides to share about our city open space. So let me switch over to that one. All right, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Wonderful. So I just wanted to start here and talk about a little bit about the Greenbelt history here. Just a nice photo from a former intern of mine here, Bishop Peak Natural Reserve from the Felsman Loop, named for our good friend Gary Felsman. So, the first time that some of the land uses and open space designations were ever set forth were in 1961 with the city's first general plan. By 1973, under California law, all cities are required to have an open space element of their city general plan. And that was done in 1973. And a really big moment that many will remember, like Councilmember Marks or maybe David Blakely here in our session, is the Environmental Quality Task Force. And they first identified some priorities and some other elements that would help us to have a sustainable green belt and other environmental issues as well. We updated that open space element in 1994. And we had a couple of really important early reports, the Vision for Sustainability from that Environmental Quality Task Force and the Saving Special Places report that were published by our colleagues at the Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo County, where I used to work for over 11 years. We have an open space ordinance. The Natural Resources Protection Program and Ranger Service were established in 1995 and 1996. And my friend and former colleague, Dr. Neil Havlick, was hired and started his work in January of 1996 when many people really think that's when we really got started with our modern activity of protecting open space around the Greenbelt. And so here we are, we're 25 years later. So we're celebrating our 25th anniversary now of protecting open space and natural resources within what would become known as the San Luis Obispo Greenbelt. Get some other management guidelines in 2002, a major update, a conservation open space element update, has some very, very strong policies and programs in 2006. And then in 2015 through 17, with the opportunity of open space as a major city goal, we had the opportunity to convene what was called the Natural Resources Roundtable, a stakeholder group, to really look and identify what was the status of the green belt and what would it take to truly make it sustainable and complete the vision for the green belt over the into the future. And that process culminated by the end of the financial plan period and spilling over a little bit with a vision plan that was called Saving Special Places Forever, a vision plan to complete and sustain the San Luis Obispo Greenbelt, which was adopted by City Council. here with this slide, we have a map of our green belt. So the heavy green line here is the green belt boundary, and the heavy red line is our city limits. So the first thing that's important to notice about this map is that our green belt and the properties that we have in conservation status extend much further out from our city limits. And that was on purpose. We wanted to capture the watershed. We wanted to capture the natural features and the scenic corridors of the San Luis Obispo area. And we also wanted to ensure conservation status of properties that weren't directly in the land use control of the city of San Luis Obispo. So here with this map, you can see in these hot green colored properties are those that are in permanent conservation status. They're either properties that we own as a city or properties where we hold a protective permanent open space easement or conservation easement. The blue ones here are public lands. They're areas like the back part of Cal Poly, Los Padres National Forest. Blue with the green surroundings is the Santa Lucia Wilderness, over 20,000 acres of wilderness, federally designated wilderness right here in our backyard that touches our green belt on the northeast side. The brown ones are in a more temporary status, I suppose would be the way to call it. And those are in Williamson Act contracts with the County of San Luis Obispo. Those are typically 10 or 20-year contracts with agricultural landowners whereby they agree to maintain their properties in agricultural use in exchange for property tax relief. It is interesting to note that while temporary, our Williamson Act contracts have been very stable since we first started tracking them. And together, along with other conservation and open space lands held by, for example, the Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo County, or open space easements held by the County of San Luis Obispo, we have about 33,750 acres in some form, level, or duration of open space and conservation status. That's about 62% of the 54,000 acre Greenbelt area. With each of our properties that we own, we always, especially the big ones, we prepare what are called conservation plans, which are ostensibly our version of a management plan that identify important flora and fauna and wildlife and features, maybe historic or cultural features of the property, and where we designate how we want to use those properties. So we have sort of subcategories within those, and 80% of the land that we owned is designated for habitat protection, with those remaining areas being active trail areas, active management areas where maybe we want to attend to invasive species or erosion, where we have cultural or historic areas. We have several of those. And then also we do have an agricultural designation with what's called the Kiowa-Keene Agricultural Reserve, but nobody calls it that. They just call it City Farm. The total value of the open space property interest that we have, now over 8,100 acres here, is $20 million. And that's based on the values of those properties at the time we acquired them. In addition, we have 55 miles of trails that are open within lands that we own. And that is for passive recreational purposes. And we always manage those where compatible with habitat protection and natural resources protection as the primary objective. In most cases, we have multi-use trails, meaning that they're available for both hiking or trail running or biking. But in some cases, they're single use. So for example, Bishop Peak Natural Reserve is available for hiking only. That's about 350 acres. Reservoir Canyon Natural Reserve behind San Luis Obispo High School is also hiking only. That's nearly 900 acres. And then other portions of certain properties have certain trails that are for hiking only, like at South Hills Natural Reserve. My last slide here is just a little bit of discussion, since we're talking about the financial plan and the budget, is just to go through a little bit and talk about what the historic Greenbelt finances have looked like. And it is remarkable that not only did our city council in the early 1990s have the vision to establish an open space program and a Greenbelt program, but they've continued to commit to funding it, both in terms of acquisition and operating and maintenance dollars, but also in terms of staffing. And so every year when we've been able to, City Council has historically funded open space and program operating budgets since the inception of the program, with a few exceptions when we've truly had fiscal austerity budgets. such as during the Great Recession in 2008 and 2009, and during other occasions. Just taking a quick look back over the last 10 years, we've spent a little over $1.4 million that was budgeted through our capital improvement plan for open space acquisition. Recognizing also that the important part of open space is the stewardship, the promise that we're going to keep and maintain and protect these lands forever in perpetuity. The operations and maintenance funding is essential. And we oftentimes do that through people as well as through equipment, as well as through other management objectives, such as invasive species treatment or erosion control, wildland urban interface, fuel reduction, those kinds of activities. So in natural resources, about $1,250,000 has been budgeted in the last 10 years. And then our ranger service here, which has the primary responsibility for operations and maintenance. Doug's team, they do all the light construction, trail building, patrol, oversight of open space on a day-to-day basis, and also education, whether it be with docent-led hikes or junior ranger camp. When you look at that, we've spent about $2.7 million on both acquisition and on operations and maintenance over the last 10 years. And so they're very balanced, about 50-50. And we feel that that's a good balance. We want to continue to expand and protect land, but we also know that we need to have the adequate resources to take care of it. Right now in our open space CIP, we have about $400,000 available. We do have programming at the $250,000 level over the next 5 years, subject to council's approval. And right now we have about $95,000 available for maintenance, with that ongoing as well. Important thing to note is that with acquisition, we've historically been able to match our investments from our CIP and those dollars allocated by the city council with grants, typically through the state of California, but sometimes at the federal level and sometimes through private philanthropy. And then we've also had donations of land, sometimes for philanthropic purposes. And then we've also had donations of land that have come as conditions of approval associated with open space. And so portions of Bishop Peak, for example, were in exchange for conditions of approval. Portions of Irish Hills were acquired in the same manner. Other portions of properties, we raised funds and we purchased land as a willing buyer with willing sellers. So that concludes my presentation. I'll stop sharing my slide, and we're now ready to open it up for your comments and questions. Again, myself, Bob Hill, and my staff colleague, Ranger Doug Carskaden. Thank you.
Bob, there's a couple questions in the chat.
Okay.
One of them is, are there any efforts to find at least one trail that can be assigned to allow dogs off leash?
Thank you. That's a good question. So one thing that's really critical to the management and operation of our open space is our open space ordinance or regulations. Those are found at chapter 12.22 of San Luis Obispo Municipal Code. And right now that code does not allow for dogs off leash in any open space or land that's designated as open space. So in order to allow that would require us to have a change to that ordinance, which would be a city council approved action, and would also require an environmental review.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, the primary purpose of open space is preservation of the natural habitat and protection of wildlife. And unfortunately, dogs just running free are a danger to, and I'm a dog lover, by the way, but dogs just running free are a danger to wildlife. And also, there are times that people are unable to actually control the dog that they have that are off leash, and that can pose a threat or possible conflict with another dog or a dog that's on the leash, or in some way threaten a hiker. So there's, I personally think it's a good policy. I sure understand why you'd want to do it though, but
Yeah.
it's not appropriate for our open space.
Thank you, Councilmember Marks. And one thing I'll note is, you know, we looked at the map and we saw how we are contiguous here with Los Padres National Forest. And so there are areas where, you know, allowing your dog to run off leash is all something that you can do relatively close in our area. In terms of some of the questions here, one from Christy Cutter, the pandemic has shown how critical the acquisition of open space is. Some places are getting so much use. That's absolutely correct. We do try to both anecdotally and qualitatively track how many people are using open space. And we are definitely, during COVID, we are seeing all-time records levels of use. And what's really interesting is of the multiple properties we have, there are just 3 that get the lion's share of that use. Johnson Ranch Open Space, Cerro San Luis Natural Reserve, and Bishop Peak Natural Reserve are by far the 3 most popular properties. But others that are less well known are also now starting to receive a lot of use, like Reservoir Canyon. And then, of course, we have a lot of neighborhood areas like Terrace Hill or South Hills that are popular with those that live nearby. Another question here is how is multi or single use determined? So earlier I was mentioning when we do a conservation plan process, that's a public engagement opportunity. So we work with the public to identify what are the opportunities and constraints for that property. We also are identifying where might we have sensitive natural resources, so rare plants or wildlife, wetlands, natural springs, those kinds of things. We also look very much at topography and terrain in making that determination. So for example, at Reservoir Canyon Natural Reserve, which is entirely serpentinite-derived soil and rock, we have a suite of rare plants there. We also have rich wildlife and very, very steep rocky terrain that doesn't really suit itself very well to biking. And so that was an instance where single use for hiking only was a clear determination. In other circumstances, however, we may have a property that has maybe some legacy Jeep roads or more favorable terrain that is less sensitive, where we can construct and build trails. And we know that people love the opportunity to be able to get out in nature and exercise for both mental and physical fitness. And going back to the prior comment, during the pandemic, that's really shown to be essential. Another question is when do we expect Miosi Open Space to be open to the public? And so that's a great question that is on a lot of people's minds. I'll let Doug maybe address a little bit of that, but I can tell you that his team is very active right now with the trail construction. And in 2015, we also adopted an open space maintenance plan. And in that plan, it identified the sort of standard amenities that would be pertinent to any open space property. So we now always try to have a trash receptacle. We learned sort of the hard way over many years that pack it in, pack it out, unfortunately doesn't work as well as we might like. We always try to put leashes out there that say leash is the law. So there's no excuses if you forgot one or don't seem to have one. We have standard kiosk design at every open space property that usually has a map, safety materials, and other educational materials, whether it be about wildlife or oak woodlands or birds or geology. And so those kinds of standard amenities are what are being installed and constructed right now at Mi Open Space. So to get really to the question, we're getting close, and we anticipate that in the next 2 to 3 months, we should be able to open the property formally to the public. And hopefully that will coincide about the right time with we have some green grass and some wildflowers as well, which would make it a really nice opportunity. Another question here is how to use the $3.2 million in lieu fees from San Luis Ranch. And my understanding is that those really are designated to be used for parklands and for capital improvements in parklands only. So in this case, it's a little bit I don't think we have the opportunity to use those funds for open space. And at Laguna Lake, the lake and the back part of the property are designated as a natural reserve. However, the park is a park. And so we draw a really clear, important distinction between a park and an open space or natural reserve in our city framework. Serious consideration to outright purchase of the Madonna Twisselman Ranch or a portion. And so that's the property that comes to the back of Laguna Lake, and it actually includes a little corner of Laguna Lake as well, and extends all the way to Foothill Boulevard. It was recently listed for sale. My understanding is that property had very quickly went into escrow. And so it is definitely challenging when properties are on the open market in a competitive environment, because for us, when we buy open space, we always do that with the benefit of an appraisal from a qualified appraiser to make sure that we're paying fair value for our public's funds. And that takes some time. And then again, oftentimes we don't have the cash required on hand to buy a property like that. That property was originally listed, I think, for $10 million or so. So that exceeds our abilities, and we would need to write grants and raise funds and things like that, which also take time. So typically we're usually successful when we can reach an arrangement with a property owner that wants to sell to us and is willing to take the time with us to make the proper arrangements to do so. So I think we addressed the question about Miosi Ranch and the Madonna Twisselman Ranch. And then the last one here, to put forth a recommendation for continued funding of maintenance and acquisition with this increased funding for ranger service to ensure property oversight, maintenance, and programming. I think both Doug and I would strongly agree that boots on the ground is critical for taking care of these properties and for providing adequate stewardship and oversight and protection forever. And generally speaking, in the industry of open space management, there's not really a rule of thumb for how much staff and personnel you should have. But we have established, just based on our experience, we need to have a full-time ranger for about every 1,000 acres of land that we own. And we're now exceeding that. So we have 3 full-time rangers, and I think, do you have right now 4 part-time rangers, Doug? Yeah, so three full-time, 4 part-time. And so we're not quite adequately resourced with rangers right now, and they are spread a little bit thin. In addition, rangers do spend their time patrolling creeks and other areas for trash and litter and encampments and those kinds of things. So they're not exclusively working in open space, which also spreads their staff a little bit thinner. I don't see any other questions, but we can take some and
We have some hands
I
up.
think,
allow people
yeah.
to be unmuted. Yeah.
We have some hands.
Yeah, Jasna.
Hi, Yasna. Hi, I'm Yasna Ivanovich. Thanks, Bob, for your presentation. I've learned a lot. From your perspective as the natural resources guy, open space guy, what do you see as the biggest threat or challenge to our city's ability to preserve and maintain our natural reserves, open spaces?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. And I don't know, the best way I might describe it is we need to ensure into the long run that we have a sustainable, reliable stream of funding. And so, you know, one thing that we find is we tend to do really well with funding of open space when financial times are good. And then we're a little bit leaner when financial times are not as good. And so, you know, we have peaks and valleys, and smoothing that out would be really helpful so we have reliable, sustainable funding into the future. And again, with the land that we own, you know, these lands are part of the commons. They're part of the public trust, and we are making a promise that we'll be able to effectively steward and take care of those properties in perpetuity. And so that's a big responsibility. And we need to make sure that we have the sustainable infrastructure, equipment, people, and funding to do that over the long term.
Can I ask a follow-up? Was there a change in the budget priority for open space when the goals changed in, I think it was, what, 2019, 20?
That's a good question. And so, you know, in 2013 through 15 financial plan, open space was identified as a other important objective in our financial plan. And in 2015 through 17, it was the major city goal. And in 2017 through 19, and also in the most recent current financial plan, 2019 through 21, open space is not specifically identified as a major city goal or other important objective. However, we have had major city goal in both of those financial plans around climate action. And in both of those climate action major city goal work programs, we nest in open space as a continuing program. And they have been continued to be funded at very similar levels to what we've done historically. And also with continued commitment from management and from staff and myself. And so, you know, now in my current role, I'm overseeing both our climate programs as well as our open space and natural resources programs. And in my mind, and this is a personal viewpoint, they go hand in hand. You know, protecting open space and land is climate action, and climate action necessarily asks us to protect open space as well, so that we don't see land conversion and we don't see sprawl and we don't see the inducement of vehicle mile trips and emissions from building far outside of our natural infrastructure for our city. Hope that addresses the question.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I could address that question as well. I think really a lot of people just take our open space program for granted. It's not new, as Bob pointed out in his presentation. It's been going on actively for 25 years and a lot longer than that. There's a rumor out there that, oh, we've got enough open space and we don't need any more and the Greenbelt is completed. I've heard that from a number of people. And it's not true. And again, as Bob pointed out, the Greenbelt's only about half, the plan is only about half realized. It's not new. It's not glamorous. It's not shiny. It's not bright colors all over the place, you know. So other cool ideas have kind of grabbed people's attention, but I think it's my own personal opinion that the lasting value of preservation of open space is it's incomparable. It needs to be treasured and and respected and not taken for granted. And so I'm glad that it's at least in the running as a major city goal. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilmember Markson, for your history and experience as well. I had a couple more questions come into the chat. One was, how do we make acquisition and maintenance of open space a city priority? And I don't mean this flippantly, we're doing it right now. This is our opportunity to do that. And, you know, I think that, you know, we, as City Manager Johnson mentioned, this is our direct opportunity at democracy and prioritization. And I know not only Councilmember Marks, but the entire City Council takes this process very seriously. And certainly we've seen a variety of public opinion research, whether it was related to Measure G, which is brought up here as well, and open space is absolutely directly in the language of that ballot measure, or whether it be our community satisfaction survey, or whether it be the you know, the input and polling. Polling's not the right word, but the engagement we're doing right now is as part of this process, and that will continue as well. I want to point out, you know, traditionally we have what's called dotocracy, with the dot exercise with the community forum. I know that the folks later on will remind us that we'll have an opportunity to do that in a virtual way tomorrow as well. Anybody else want to make a comment verbally?
Yeah,
I don't see any others.
Brett
I just had a
has his hand
question.
up.
Go ahead.
He's had his hand up for a while.
Bob, so what projects following up on that do you have envisioned? Because if you don't have really, you know, a plan saying we'd like to purchase these properties or we'd like to do these other, we have these other goals, it doesn't go anywhere, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I brought up it, and so I'm kind of wondering, if you don't have a plan, you know, the council doesn't have anything to look at. Say, geez, we really like to have, maybe even though Madonna Twisselman has been sold, I'm not too sure what's happened there. That's something we're looking at purchasing. Or we're looking at purchasing these other properties. Whether you do it or not, at least the council has an idea. Here's what it costs. Here's what we like to do.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Brett. So a couple of parts to that. One is you know, we do have this document I described in the presentation, that Saving Special Places Forever, and it does include a description of 5 sort of geographic areas. It doesn't go into property specific priorities, but it gives geographic areas, right? So, you know, farmland in Los Osos Valley and Edna Valley, and headwater springs and wildlife corridors in Cuesta Canyon and in the northern part of the Greenbelt, and oak woodlands and wildlife and working ranches in the Irish Hills, and so forth. And so we do have a set of priorities for open space. And I think that that's one of the ways that we're able to move forward. I think maybe another part of the question is you know, what are we doing right now? And you know, we are continuing to work with the Miosi family in a voluntary negotiation towards a conservation easement for part of their historic ranch there. we were awarded a $3 million grant by the state of California through a program that's called the Sustainable Agricultural Land Conservation Program, which is funded through our California Climate Investments, or basically our cap and trade carbon program. And so that extent of it is public information. Insofar as they published a staff report and so forth. I want to be really clear, there's a lot of work to still do with that project, and we still have to ultimately come to a final agreement with the sellers there for that easement interest. But we've been working together in good faith for some time now, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to continue and complete that transaction. Yeah, I had a hand from Mr. Smigelski, and certainly Mayor Marks, we appreciate your comments.
Nope, not Mayor Marks.
Oops, sorry.
Oops. I'm a council member and I'm proud.
Legacy.
Mayor's not a forever title, like governor and secretary.
No,
and...
it gets everybody confused, John.
That's mental muscle memory.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Oh, that's okay.
Mr. Smigelski.
So Laguna Lake is in the, I think, this is the year 3 coming up of the 5-year permit we got from all the Corps and everybody else, and there's funds for that pilot program, and this is the last year was supposed to be like kind of the learning year. Like, what are the costs? How do we do it? How can we do it better? Maybe split the contracts up between hauling and, and et cetera. What do we have to do if we want to, make sure that keeps going at this point in time during this budget process?
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question, and I'm not sure I have all the answers to that question, but I think that ultimately the first question, as you mentioned, our first project we really see as a proof of concept. We want to iron out the kinks, figure out how to do it in a way that is environmentally responsible, and in terms of the trucking and the hauling and the sediment management and those kinds of things, and to establish a relationship with contractors that know what they're doing as well. Ultimately, I think that there is a possibility for grant funding for a variety of the things that are in the Laguna Lake Natural Reserve Conservation Plan, including, the lake management itself. And so I think that we, as we continue to support the project through our capital improvement plan program, I think we can also expand and leverage those funds in the grant making environment.
Yeah. So part of it is removing the sediment, and part of it is stopping the sediment from going in. Work that we talked about doing at the golf course. There is some shoreline protection work going on now, but it's not really the whole thing, kind of thing, even the whole park length.
That's correct. And relating with our overall open space program as well, in that particular area in the Laguna Lake Conservation Plan, we also identified using conservation easements and land conservation techniques in the upper watersheds of Perfumo Creek and the streams that come out of O'Connor Valley and Los Osos Valley that come into Laguna Lake as a means of maintaining low intensity land uses. And whereas we know when we see more rural development in those kinds of ranches, we see dirt roads and more sedimentation and more coming into the system as well.
Yeah, and so to get those in the budget scope, is there a way to do that? Is this a time to try and do that, or is that just like that's grant available, some county money, some flood protection? Is that kind of what goes into that, or?
Yes, I think that's right, John. And then the last thing I'll say is, we did see in some of the reaction to the online survey here relative to community forum that many folks that were interested in Laguna Lake broke that out as a separate topic, but it is important. Laguna Lake Natural Reserve is an open space in our open space system. And so we can think of it that way as well.
Some call it the jewel.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just curious, when you said you need a reliable source of funding, how would you describe that? Would you describe that as a dollar amount or a percentage of the Measure G money? Or what? If someone wanted to try to establish that, or at least bring it up as a possibility, what would it be?
That's a great question. I haven't considered that, what would the dream budget be, or the Cadillac version, or whatever.
No, not even Cadillac.
Ultimately-
I'm talking a used Prius.
Yeah.
No, just,
Right.
no, just what,
What I
it
meant by
could-
that, Councilmember
Mhm.
Marks, is not so much a dollar amount or a percentage, but rather something that's reliable and predictable, right? That we can build our
Mhm.
programs around, and that we know will be there on an ongoing basis.
what the county did, and this is back in the day when I was on the County Parks and Recreation Commission, thanks to David Blakely, who appointed me in 1990, strangely enough. They had a percentage of the general fund that they allocated to parks. It was way too low, but it was there, all the time. And the dollar amount would fluctuate because what's in the general fund would fluctuate, but at least it was a sort of proportional statement of ongoing stability and certainty. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I should say there are a whole suite and a variety of different approaches that open space purveyors and open space districts and others that do this kind of thing, how they fund their programs. And so certainly something we could do with staff would be to provide some sort of a study session or educational forum to sort of say, hey, this is the universe of how others that are out there in California fund their open space programs and take care of these problems that we're talking about.
Okay.
There's a whole manner of different approaches that are out there, that's for sure, in terms of open space finance.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to go to visit another room, but thank you everyone for being here. I really appreciate it, and keep in touch. And
Thanks
now I
for
have to
joining
figure
us.
out how to do that.
Thank you.
Yikes. How do I do this? I go to the speaker view.
Or go to the main website, the website
Yeah.
on Slow City website, and then just click on the room that you want to go to. If you go to slowcity.org and community forum.
Oh, and that's in the chat, right?
That's the main room, but if you go to slowcity.org and then type in community forum, and that'll list all of the breakout rooms.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh,
We have
wait,
about
let's
10 minutes left here. So
Hey,
if there's
Bob?
any,
Hello?
David,
I sent you a chat. So, there's Quimby fees, and then we have developer fees for things like fire departments and roads and things like that. Is it possible to do the analysis and have open space acquisition as a developer fee too? Because it seems like it would be easy to prove a nexus there between the new growth and the development and the need for open space, the same way that we do it for parks or transportation or sewer or water or police. And if it is possible, are you proposing that to city administration and ultimately the council?
that's a great question. And so those types of fees, Quimby Act fees and development fees, are allowable under California law. And that is how some people do their programs. That's how some people do their programs exclusively. And so again, it doesn't necessarily result in that stable, reliable funding source, because it kind of goes with the booms and busts of development. In our city, we do have an open space fee program that is part of the airport area specific plan, but that's the only part of town where we collect fees at the current time.
Well, why not make it universal? Why not just fold it into all the other, it becomes a political issue at this point? There's
you'd have to change policy. You'd have to add
Yeah.
it to the policy, but
Yeah, I think that's right, David. It becomes an issue, and we always look very carefully, what is the total fee burden on a particular project, and and there's a rule of thumb around that, and that's I actually am not sure what that is, but we
I understand that, but I look
evaluate that all
at it
very carefully.
as a reduction of quality of life to the things that I guess I love about this community. If there's an extra burden put on those resources and there's not a commensurate offset, basically to me, that's kind of a CEQA problem, that you're not mitigating the impacts, and the impacts to open space in this case, of the growth and development. And it goes right down to each individual, not just the big projects, but each individual residence is contributing to that impact, particularly when you think about something like Bishop's Peak, where the emphasis is for the local use. You know, there's been actions of the city council to take it out of promoting it as a visitor's attraction to try to encourage local use. So it seems like it would be very easy to make an argument that it could be folded into the comprehensive developer fee program.
Yep, it would be allowable. And I should say that in really all of our specific plan areas that have been identified and in our land use element of the general plan, whether that be the Orchid area specific plan or Margarita area specific plan, the airport, San Luis Ranch, and now with the Froome Ranch project, all of those specific plan areas have required open space dedication components of those projects for the reasons that you're mentioning. Where we anticipate future growth, we need to anticipate natural resources protection and opportunities for the people that will live there to be nearby that amenity.
Yeah, I guess the subtle little difference, Bob, is that I believe that it gets down to individual projects and not just these specific plans. Like if somebody's going to build an ADU in the community, which there's a big push for now, that's an impact that is going to be felt on our open space. And that impact should be mitigated. And the way that you mitigate it is by collecting a fee to get more open space, so it's not degraded, or the quality of life is diminished because of the additional demand and not the additional resources to acquire more open space.
Thank you. And you're correct. And in those types of situations and in those types of infill projects, which we encourage, there's no fee program in that as you described.
Tangent to Dave's comments, how can we help you be more aggressive and proactive in following through with this open space acquisition?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's one thing I'll say is amazing. I think the people that are here on right now, I think I know almost all of you, and see you around the community, and it's wonderful just to know that the program we're overseeing is so well supported and cherished and loved in our community, and there's many more out there. We know that, and so it's just, to me, it's deeply inspiring, and it's the work that I set out to do and dreamed of doing. And so that is tremendous support to be able to be involved with a program that's so well loved. It's also a lot of responsibility and sometimes stressful, but I think that, again, I just want to reiterate the process that we're having right now, this civic dialogue, this input, this engagement is helpful to me as a manager of these resources to deliver the promises that we're trying to make to the public.
And I guess where I'm frustrated is for a lot of us that you've known for so long, the last 5 years have been kind of the decimation of a lot of trees and a lot of open space and a lot of areas. And when we look at these new developments and we're trying to plan for like open space and we see these morsels of really choice land, it's like, instead of just talking about it, it's like, how can we help you be the most aggressive? Is it just tonight? Is it, how do we become that force of nature, so to speak? No pun intended.
Yeah, thank you. You're right. There's definitely, in the last, particularly coming out of this sort of mega drought that we had, there was a net loss of trees, even despite our tree planting standards and our volunteer efforts to put trees in the ground as much as we can. And it's part of why we wanted to have this initiative to plant 10,000 trees. I envision that some of those will be street trees where we have empty tree wells, but some of those will be in our riparian areas, and some of those will be in our open space areas. And so I think that's one way we'll be able to restore our overall tree canopy. And I think ultimately we're in the correct process right now. We want to see us doing more of this, and we want to expand this and double down our efforts. This is the process, and this is the opportunity to do that. Mr. Johnson, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Bob. Thanks for everyone joining us tonight.
We have had a good conversation and talked about a whole variety of things. Lots of great open space supporters here online right now.
But let me ask Derek a question here, Bob.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so Bob has been very politically careful in the way he's been communicating as Derek. And I know that he reports to you, and you ultimately report to the council. But there was a discussion about possibly folding in an acquisition of open space as a part of the developer fee program. And I know ultimately that becomes a political decision, but do you think that there's any support for it on the city council, or do you think that there's other forces at work here that might not make it that level of a priority?
So, sorry, Mr. Blakes, if I understand your question, I think the question is there political will for an open space impact fee?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And I don't know the answer to that. So because we haven't asked that particular question. I would say that, the best way from my assessment to get it open space acquisitions is to take general fund and Measure G dollars, continue to set it aside in our open space fund, and continue to leverage it with grants. And I think that the city's general plan policies have served the community well in terms of when we annex properties in, a la Margarita area, Orchid area, Froome Ranch, Avila Ranch, et cetera. That is part of the process, that they be consistent with the general plan policies and require considerable allocation of open space, either on site or, they provide funding in the case of like Avila Ranch did. I just want to say to everyone who's on the right now, I think everyone in the city is excited to do more. We have a lot more work to do in our open space and our greenbelt. I mean, the goal, as Bob knows, is I think it's 54,000 acres. My total is, maybe it's 35. I can't remember the exact number, but we have a long way to go. I think we're about 7,000 acres in fee and in easement. So we have a long way to go. We usually do about one acquisition a year. And in the area, Mr. Blakes, we've been trying to focus on lately is, as we acquire, also to make sure that we are also being good stewards of the property. And so making sure we have good access, et cetera. And that's a challenge, and we're going to need to add more resources in the future. So a little bit of long-winded answer, but the exact question about impact fees for open space, that's a policy question I think that the council would have to give direction to staff on.
Thanks,
Or
Derek.
the other way around. Why can't staff make that recommendation?
Well, I think this is the purpose of the forum, is really so we're recording your ideas, and bring these ideas to council, and council picks them up. And if they're persuasive to the council, Bob, remind me, did we, when we did our impact fees about 3 years ago, did we look at an open space impact fee at all? Can't recall.
Right now we have an open space impact fee in airport area specific plan only. When we most recently updated that, we upped the fee to be more contemporary. But that's the only area that we currently have a fee program in the traditional sense, like a Quimby fee or that kind of a thing. And so, there's other areas like infill projects that don't get captured by that. One of the comments that I made as we were talking about open space finance is that at some point it may be of interest to the council and community to have a study session about what are open space financing options and what is the universe of choices that are out there. Because in my experience, and I'm a I grew up in the Bay Area, and I consider the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District to be like the gold standard. That's how I grew up and got into this. They have a way that they do it, but next door to them, where Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority is, they do it a different way. And of course, we know that the city is relatively unique insofar as that there aren't many local government city levels of organization that have open space programs that are as robust as ours, but ours is modeled after Boulder, Colorado, and they have yet another different way that they do it. So I think, that might be something that could be of interest, again, to both council and community to at least know what the options are out there.
So Derek, does the ADU regulations prohibit collecting these kind of developer fees when you build ADUs?
Yeah, the new legislation is pretty restrictive. I mean, the state is more and more tying the hands of local government, and ADUs are a mandate.
So you cannot collect a developer fee on them?
It's basically a building permit, and the recent legislation now is that we can't even, we're very limited on water and sewer impact fees, and no traffic fees can be assigned. So, essentially, we've gotten a lot of mandates that have really curtailed. And Mr. Blakely, there was actually one of the bills that was going through last year would have suspended all impact fees. And so there is really a tide pushing in the other direction that, and we're the only city for the most part that has a very robust impact fee program in the region. And so we're trying to hold on to that because it really funds all the things that, in my opinion, preserve quality of life in San Luis Obispo. Without it, we would be really behind the 8 ball.
I think we have just a couple more minutes left before we go to break here and then come back to the normal session. Any others, particularly anyone that didn't get a chance to speak? Leah Brooks or BK Richard or Thomas Gutierrez, others that are here? Go ahead, Lindy.
Is this where we would talk about the Juan Bautista National Historic Trail? I mean, we have a beautiful National Historic Trail going through our area, all up the 101 corridor, and it seems like there could be some marketing efforts to bring people in to appreciate that trail. Heritage tourism brings in high dollar visitors and folks that would stay in our area once COVID is through.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. We used to maintain a kiosk and informational pamphlets in Mission Plaza about the Juan Bautista Trail. And the other thing that's really interesting actually is we just have acquired a new property called, we're calling it Miosi Open Space. And the trailhead there is right along Old Stagecoach Road at the bottom of Cuesta Canyon. And that in fact is part of the Bautista Trail as well, as you would have gone over Cuesta Grade and used Old Stagecoach or even Padre Road before that. And so that would be another occasion where we could include in some of our informational materials and educational materials at that trailhead information about the Juan Bautista National Trail. And that is, for others that are on in the room here, that is a project that's overseen by the National Park Service.
I'm the vice president on their National Historic Trail board as my other hat that I wear. And I come from a National Trails background and just really appreciate not only the local beauty, but the recreation and the opportunities to learn about history on that trail. And I just want to see us capture all of that.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Many of our properties have really outstanding, cultural and historical stories that they can tell to us. Absolutely. Wonderful. If there's nobody else, I would like to really thank everybody for a good, productive dialogues. A lot of good ideas were expressed here. We will be able to follow up on those.
Bob, I'm sorry to interrupt. I did have my hand up. I don't know if you have a moment to, I apologize to interrupting you, but I wanted to maybe bring up a topic. Is there a moment to do that? Or if there's not, I can.
Yes, please do so. I missed it. I apologize.
No worries. No worries. Thank you for the opportunity. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity again to submit comments to this, and I thank you for all the hard work by the Rangers in maintaining the open spaces. I did want to just bring up something that may have been brought up earlier. I came in late to this meeting, but I did communicate this in the homeless session, is that there are homeless issues that do impact the open spaces, particularly improvised camping and near the Greenbelt and the creek, maybe along the Bob Jones Trail and other spaces, open fires and unregulated fires. And I would urge maybe that there be more resources for the rangers and the CAT team to address these issues as going forward. The homeless issue couples into so many aspects of community life. But I just wanted to bring that up, that I think it does directly impact elements of the open space discussion. So I just wanted to put that out there. So again, thank you for that opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. And we did discuss, a little bit how Ranger Service staff is deployed, and that is one of the ways that they are doing work. And it is an ongoing, very, very difficult challenge. And resources for that would be welcome, for sure.
We have a quick minute for Armando he's got his hand up.
Yes.
Hi, yeah, just a quick question. I wasn't sure if something like a pump track, similar to what Morro Bay has, something for kids in an open space area would be something that would be under that umbrella of open space in the budget.
Yeah, thank you. One area that we have looked at where we could do a little pump track or a bike track is there are some older sort of remnant parcels next to the railroad safety trail over there by the Jennifer Street Bridge as you approach Sinsheimer Park. Yeah. And so that's one area that we've identified where we could install that type of facility. And then in the chat there, Mr. Blakely did mention what's called the Ukes informally, which is in the Stenner Springs Natural Reserve, where we have ramp riding areas and things like that, and skills.
Yeah,
course.
I was thinking something more, with some of the younger kids that can't do the big hikes or some of the big open space trails that we have, or the more steep terrain climbs, something like a pump track where the
kids. Yeah, I got it. And I think that spot at that I'm describing by the railroad safety trail between Jennifer Street Bridge and the and Sinsheimer Park could be really nice in that regard. It's not too big. It's easy to get there from a lot of different neighborhoods for kids. And it's right off the bike path with a little bit of terrain and that kind of thing.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
I've posted the main room to get back to the last session. So we need to head back there shortly.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, everybody. I appreciate the conversation.
Thank you very much.
Did you say you posted the link in the chat?
Yeah, the main room link.
I don't see it.
Yeah, we don't see it yet.
Did you post it to everyone?
Yeah.
Someone's.
Oh no, it's just to, let's see.
Okay.
Hold on.
We're all learning Zoom.
Yeah. Okay, so up to. How do I get it to everybody here? Hold on. How come I can't get it to everybody?
There's a little drop down in the to section.
Check the chat,
I got chat and I'm sending it to.
little arrow, and type in the connection. Lindy, I'm a history teacher. I might reach out to you.
Oh, I would love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on the I'm at Laguna Middle School. We're all online, but I do a huge trail thing on moving out west. So there you go. So
Oh, awesome.
you're singing my song. So anyway, nice to see you.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
I just got some national legislation passed extending the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail 1,200 miles at my last job.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
And
That's all
reauthorizing the Land Water Conservation Fund. So I would love to talk to you.
very exciting. We may bring you in as a guest speaker to my history class. How about
Oh,
that?
love that. Yeah.
Yay. Okay. So you should tell me how I find you as we're waiting to get connected.
I'm with the Home Builders Association of the Central Coast, and I'm going to put my email in the chat.
Okay, perfect. Okay, awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
If I can get in. Oh, chat's disabled.
Oh, chat's disabled. So,
Okay, yeah, I can.
Oh, that's what happened.
I
So
couldn't
my-
get to.
My
Okay,
recommendation, and Miguel, you tell us if this is right, but we'd be to leave the meeting and then go back to the way that you got into the meeting in the first place.
Yes,
That's
I think
correct.
so.
Yeah, I was just trying to put that up on the chat when I
Okay.
lost it, but you can go
Thanks
back
a
to the
lot,
city's
Bob.
main website and get that information as well.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you, Bob. Lindy, I will track you down. I'm good at that.
okay.
Okay, good.
L
Okay, bye.
Hatcher. I'm gonna give you
Thank
my
you.
email, lhatcher@hbacc.org.
Yep, and if you guys go to slowcity.org/community forum, you will get to the page with all the links.
Thank you.
You're very
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.